Welcome to Meet the Court. I'm your host, Jawad Johnson. Meet the Court is brought to you as a public service by the Superior Court of New Jersey in Atlantic and Cape May counties, as well as the Cape May Technical High School, to better inform you, the public, on the workings of the court and the role of the judiciary in our communities. Today's topic, expungements. How does this complex legal process work? Here to guide us through this process, our guests. Managing Attorney for South Jersey Legal Services, James McLean. Welcome, Jim.
Good to be here. Thank you, Jawad.
And frequent contributor and guest to the show, Assistant Trial Court Administrator, Jill Helk. Welcome back, Jill.
Thanks. Happy to be back.
So, Jill, you'll get us started. Just explain to us, why would somebody need an expungement?
Well, Jawad, imagine the worst thing you've ever done, the biggest mistake you've ever made. Maybe you hurt somebody's feelings, maybe you really embarrassed yourself. Now imagine having to write that incident down every time you applied for a job or applied for housing or a loan or a mortgage. That's what someone with a criminal record has to do, even if, 10 years has passed since they made that mistake.
So an expungement sounds like a technical term. What is it?
An expungement is the extraction and isolation of everywhere that someone's arrest or conviction shows in the public eye. So where the arrest shows at the police station, the municipal court, the superior court, the prosecutor's office, the probation division. It's not a deletion of the arrest or the conviction, but it's just an isolation so the public can't view it anymore.
So Jim, you must get folks come to your office for assistance with these type of matters. So what are the type of eligibility requirements that exist to get records expunged?
Well, there are a number of factors that we look at in determining whether or not someone's eligible for an expungement. We look at the nature of the offense, the number of offenses committed. We look at whether or not someone's been granted an expungement before, how much time has elapsed between the completion of the sentence for the underlying conviction or convictions and the filing of the expungement petition. We also look at whether or not the person's been granted PTI or has received a conditional discharge or other supervisory program. But the eligibility is the first item that we have to determine before proceeding.
Okay, so I come to you with a complex history. I've got a complex background, and I've got multiple indictable offenses. Can I expunge those?
It depends. Generally, you can expunge one indictable offense. That's a crime of the first, second, third, or fourth degree here in New Jersey. Or one indictable plus 4 disorderly persons or petty disorderly persons offenses. But there's also a way that you can expunge more than one indictable offense and more than a few disorderly persons offenses. And that depends on when the offenses were committed. And by that, I mean if the offenses were interdependent upon each other and they were committed within a relatively short period of time as a continuing sequence of events, you can have more offenses expunged. Moreover, if the offenses that you're seeking to have expunged are listed in a single judgment of conviction, you can also expunge multiple offenses.
Okay, so you talked about I could expunge a combination of indictable and disorderly persons offenses if I needed to do that, some higher level offenses with lower level offenses.
That's correct.
Okay, so can all criminal convictions be expunged?
No, not all criminal convictions. The most serious criminal convictions like murder, kidnapping, robbery, that type of thing, those are non-expungible offenses, and those cannot be expunged under any circumstances.
Okay. So I've been convicted of a crime, and now I want an expungement. How long do I have to wait before I seek one?
It depends on the grading of the offense. Recently, the expungement laws have changed. It used to be that you had to wait 10 years from the completion of your sentence for an indictable offense before you could file a petition for expungement, but the legislature has lessened that to 6 years. For disorderly and petty disorderly persons offenses, it's 5 years. Juvenile delinquency record, 3 years. An ordinance violation, 2 years. Drug court graduation immediately.
Okay. So you talked about the expungement of juvenile delinquency. Mm-hmm. Do the same rules apply? Can I seek an expungement of a juvenile delinquent adjudication?
Yes, you can. It's the same as if you were an adult in terms of the nature of the offense. The only difference would be for a juvenile record. Again, you only have to wait 3 years as opposed to if you're an adult and you have an indictable offense where petty disorderly persons or disorderly persons offense will be 5 years. And there are exceptions to the waiting periods as well. If you can show that it's in the public interest to have the court grant an expungement before the 6 years elapse, as long as you have waited at least 5 years, then you can seek an expungement at that time. So there are what they call public interest exceptions or early pathway.
Okay. So what I haven't heard is about motor vehicle arrests or convictions for motor vehicle offenses. Can they be expunged?
No, they can't, Jawad. Only criminal offenses can be expunged. Those are offenses that are listed under the Criminal Code of the State of New Jersey. Motor vehicle offenses come under the motor vehicle statutes, so they're not considered criminal in nature.
Well, that's an interesting distinction. This is Meet the Court, and I'm your host, Jawad Johnson. We'll be back with our guests, Jim McLean and Jill Houck, discussing expungement after this message.
Hello, my name is Tom Hegarty. I'm a sergeant with the Cape May County Sheriff's Office. And some of the things that you should know when you enter any of our courthouses is that once you come in, you're going to be screened by an officer at the front desk. So what you should not have on you is any weapons, tools, anything that's going to slow down that process. You're going to come in, put all your metal objects up on the counter, step through the metal detector, listening to the officer's direction. Once you step through, he'll let you know whether you can continue on or whether you should stop. If he stops you, you may have to be wanded with the hand wand. Detect anything else that you may have on you that's not picking up. So to speed your trip along and to help come in, because there may be lines when you come in and there may be delays. So you want to get here early, and you also want to have less objects on you that will impede your progress of coming in.
Welcome back to Meet the Court. I'm your host, Jawad Johnson, here with our guests, Jim McLean and Jill Houck. And if you just tuned in, we've been discussing expungements, or the clearing of the criminal record. So, Jill, if someone has open charges, can they apply for an expungement?
If someone has open charges, they can't expunge any convictions. They could expunge an arrest that's been dismissed or they've been acquitted or a diversion opportunity, but no convictions can be expunged if someone has open charges.
So they can expunge an arrest record. Why would they want to do such a thing?
If someone has been arrested and the case was never proven and the charge was dismissed, or the person was found not guilty, they're actually eligible for what's called an expedited expungement. So that can be, there's no waiting period. It's expunged within a week or two.
Seems like that would help them if they were looking for a job with law enforcement or something like that in the future. So there has to be a cost to this. If someone is still making payments on fines to various courts, can they do they have to pay those fines first before they'll be eligible for an expungement?
It depends. If the full waiting period has expired, 6 years on an indictable or 5 years on a disorderly person charge, they don't have to pay the fines and fees in full, though they do have to show the court that they did make their best effort to pay those fines and fees. On an ordinance violation, though, everything must be paid in full.
Earlier you mentioned drug recovery court and folks being eligible there. If a person has completed and graduated from drug recovery court, what are their options for getting their records expunged?
Someone that graduated successfully from recovery/drug court can have their entire record expunged, even if they have more than 4 convictions, even if they have more than 1 indictable conviction. If someone graduated prior to April 2016, they are required to file the paperwork on their own, though we do provide that person with a lot of extra help because they tend to have more arrests than the average person. But they would have to file in the county where they were sentenced to drug court. Anyone that's graduated drug court after April 2016, the public defender's office files all the paperwork for them, and they basically just have to sit back and wait for the record to be expunged.
Okay, so we touched on how much the cost of paying old fines would be. How about the cost to file the paperwork itself? Does it cost anything?
It's a $75 filing fee. However, that can be waived if the person is indigent. They do have to fill out an extra form to ask the court to waive the fee. The cost comes in where all of the paperwork has to be mailed certified, which can cost about $3 per mailing. And some people can have to mail to 20 different mailings. So that's where the cost that cost cannot be waived.
And those costs can't be waived because it's
No.
the United States Post Office. Well, let's say I have something in multiple counties. I've got charges in various different counties. What county do I file in for to have my record expunged in all of those counties?
Where the person would file wherever the indictable conviction, if they have one, occurred. So even if they have one indictable conviction in Atlantic and say 3 shoplifting convictions in Cumberland County, they would file in Atlantic. If all they have is disorderly persons offenses, then they would file where the most recent one occurred.
Okay, how about out of state? I've got an out of state conviction. I'm living in New Jersey now, starting my life over again. Am I eligible to file in New Jersey?
As long as you're still under the, 4 convictions, or like Jim explained, if you are allowed to expunge the multiple indictable convictions, an out-of-state record actually does count towards the number of convictions, and you must list all of those charges on your petition. However, the out-of-state charge does have to be the equivalent of a New Jersey conviction. So, for example, in most states in America, driving while intoxicated is actually a felony or a misdemeanor offense. Here, it's still a traffic offense. So if someone has multiple DUIs in another state, that would not count against them here as their conviction count. But they would still have to list them.
So, start to finish, how long can someone who is looking for an expungement expect the process to take?
As long as the person mails everything very quickly and does their own follow-up, the expungement process can be granted in about 2 months. The waiting period comes in for all of the agencies to remove the person's record from their system. Currently, the state police have about a 6-month backlog, so they keep everyone's fingerprint record, so that is the most important record that needs to be expunged. So it can take about 8 months for the entire process in order for someone to actually say they don't have a record anymore.
So how does someone who needs to know, you said you need to have all of your charge information, how does someone get all of that history so they can complete their paperwork?
Well, if someone has a very minimal record, they can just go to that municipal court where they remember their charges were disposed of, or Superior Court, and they can get, a record of the disposition. If we have an expungement seminar, if the judiciary hosts an expungement seminar, we do help people and provide them with their records as well. And also people can get fingerprinted. It's about a $65 charge.
Jim, I'm coming to you. With expungements, what from your position, your standpoint, has been some of the challenges that folks face trying to get expungements?
Some of them have challenges because they don't recall much about what they did, and therefore we have to rely upon records either provided through the FBI or through the state of New Jersey. Excuse me. The cost, unfortunately, for people who are doing it themselves, unless they can prove that they're indigent, they do, have to incur the fingerprinting fee, as well as the filing fee and the cost of the certified mail. If our office or any South Jersey Legal Services office represents someone, they don't have to pay the filing fee. The only fee that they would have to pay would be the cost of fingerprinting. We even do all the certified mailing for them.
So about 30 seconds. It sounds like South Jersey Legal Services is a great benefit to the community because they can provide services like for expungement.
That's correct. Yeah, and we handle lots of them, and it really opens a lot of doors for our clients, both in terms of securing housing and getting jobs.
Well, that sounds like an excellent service to the community. This is Meet the Court. I'm your host, Jawad Johnson, and we'll be back with our guests, Jim McLean and Jill Houck, after this message.
Hello again. Some of the things that you should know when you're entering a courtroom is there's a certain courtroom etiquette that's expected of you. You should come in, quietly take a seat, remain quiet at all times. You should remove any coverings on your head, hats, hoodies. Sit down, take any cell phones, turn them completely off, and have them away. If they're seen out, they can be confiscated. There's an officer that usually sits in the front of the room. He is there for the judge's safety as well as the public safety. So if you're going to ask him a question, instead of just blurting it out or getting up and approaching him, get his attention discreetly, raise your hand, and he will approach you and ask the question at a quiet level. Okay, thank you.
Welcome back to Meet the Court. I'm your host, Jawad Johnson, and we've been discussing the expungement process with our guests, Jim McLean and Jill Houck. So, Jill, we were discussing at the break, sometimes folks may go 10, 20, maybe 30 years before they decide to do this. And if they have charges from that many years ago and they can't recall the details of the extent of their charges, how do they find out if they're eligible for this type of service?
That person should really get fingerprinted. It's about a $65 fee. The directions can be found on the New Jersey State Police website. But once they get that record, then they could bring that to Jim or I, and we could look at it and tell them whether they were eligible or not.
Okay. And a person, they come and they get their paperwork to file, but they find it complicated or they can't read as well. There may be some literacy issues there. They don't speak the language. Is there anyone that can help them complete the forms?
The judiciary will help the person if they come to the Court User Resource Center at the Atlantic County Superior Courthouse in Atlantic City. And also South Jersey Legal Services will help them complete the paperwork.
Excellent. And I hear that the Court User Resource Center has a wonderful ombudsperson there that is just awesome and really into helping members of the public. So
yes, definitely. The whole staff is great.
And they're all great. Yeah, they should come and visit. So, Jill, another question for you. Is it necessary for me to appear in court to testify in favor of the expungement if there's no objection from an agency that holds the criminal record? Is there any reasons to appear?
No, the actual hearing date is more a due date for all the agencies where the person's record exists to object to the expungement, basically saying, I don't think John Smith is eligible. No news is good news is what I say. If someone doesn't hear back from the prosecutor's office or the court before their hearing date, that means the expungement is going to be granted and the person just has to wait to get their expungement order in the mail. If a hearing is necessary, then the person would be notified.
Okay. And not holding you to any numbers, but guesstimate, how many times do you get challenges from other agencies when an expungement, someone attempts an expungement?
The biggest challenge is usually that the person forgets an arrest. Usually, we don't have a lot of people that are ineligible applying. People pretty much know, that they check before they go through all of the paperwork to see if they're eligible or not. More often than not, someone had an arrest in Egg Harbor City back in 1986 that they forgot about, and they just have to amend their paperwork to include those offenses.
Okay. So, Jim, how many expungements can I get?
You can only get one, Jawad, just one per lifetime.
Okay. So does that mean I have to include every single criminal charge that I've ever had in my time? I get one bite at the apple, as they say?
Yes.
Okay. So how do I respond to a question about arrests and convictions, the dreaded box, if you will, following a expungement?
Generally, you can answer that truthfully by saying, no, you've never had an arrest or conviction once those charges have been expunged. However, there are certain exceptions. For instance, if you're applying for a job with law enforcement or the courts or a correctional department, you would have to disclose that, as well as any judge who may be sentencing you for a new criminal offense following the expungement. They would look at that, as well as the correction department in determining where to house you. But generally speaking, you can truthfully answer no, I've never had any convictions.
So is that the ways that you named, are those the ways that expungement records can be used? Can they ever be used beyond those ways, checking your status for law enforcement employment or the sentencing for another judge?
That's right.
Okay.
It's limited to those.
So can an expungement ever be recalled or nullified in any type of way?
Yes, the quick answer is yes. It's very rare, but if you lie in your expungement petition and then it comes to light, it can be, the expungement order can be vacated or nullified. Also, if you have any pending criminal charges that you did not disclose on your expungement petition and it's discovered within 5 years, also the expungement order can be vacated and nullified.
So I've heard anecdotes where someone comes in and says that they spoke to the court and they told them they're not eligible for an expungement. But then they went and spoke to an attorney and told them that they are eligible and all they have to do is pay $1,500. Who's correct?
The court.
Okay.
Yeah, practicing law is a commercial enterprise, so it's in an attorney's best interest to give someone hope that they may be eligible for an expungement. But if you go to court and meet with a member of the staff, like at the resource center, and they've gone through everything and have determined that you're not eligible, I would go with the court staff.
So is your suggestion that they go and seek information from the court first before they go and try to put the wheels in motion for an expungement?
Yes, either the courts or the legal services program.
So, Joe, you talked a little bit about challenges before. What would you think would be the biggest challenge that someone would face, the biggest fear, and how should they overcome it?
I think people are very intimidated by the paperwork. It can be voluminous. It can be a little bit confusing. I mean, sometimes I find it confusing and I work for the court. But we tell people it's very tedious, but it is worth it. It's a long process, but you know, at the end you get to say, no, I don't have a criminal record. So just don't be afraid to ask for help. There are people there that will help people fill out the paperwork.
Jim, there may be some viewers who are watching this and they may say, it sounds soft on crime to me. Can you tell me why this is a public benefit and how this isn't soft on crime, but actually restorative justice?
Well, the purpose of an expungement is to give someone who may have made a mistake a fresh start, kind of like a bankruptcy, if you think about it. It's not meant to help criminals who commit repeated offenses to expunge their records. It's meant to help those people who've rehabilitated themselves and have gone on to live a crime-free life, basically, following their convictions.
So 30 seconds for each of you. Just give me some endorsement of why you think that folks who are in this position should come to get an expungement as soon as they can. Jill, we'll start with you.
An expungement can be a life-altering experience. Like I said, you can move on from that mistake you made and not have to keep reliving it. Every single time you apply for a job or apply for housing or a loan, you don't have to disclose it anymore.
Jim, from your perspective?
Yes, Jawad, we've also seen at Legal Services that many of our clients who are seeking either public or subsidized housing have a very difficult time securing that housing but for the expungement. And like Jill mentioned, with jobs, there are so many jobs that require a criminal background check, especially in Atlantic City with the casinos and the casino licensing. So getting an expungement really opens a lot more doors.
So it certainly seems like expungement is the first step in the road back. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and I'd like to thank you for being with us for Meet the Court. I'm your host, Jawad Johnson. Goodbye for now.